Did you know that colonial punishments in Africa were often 3 times harsher than in Europe for the same crimes? This wasn't just about law and order, it was about control. Welcome to the History, Mystery and Crime channel, where we delve into the dark corners of the past. Today, we confront a chilling reality, the unpunished crimes of colonial Africa. This isn't just a history lesson, it's an exposé of a system designed to exploit, oppress, and erase. Our story begins not with grand battles or treaties, but in the shadows of prisons, the crack of whips, and the silent screams of stolen land. The seeds of colonial criminal justice were sown early. As early as 1812, in Sierra Leone, prisons began to emerge, marking the start of a carceral system that would spread like a disease across the continent, hand in hand with former colonial rule. These prisons were not simply imported from Europe. They evolved, adapting to the specific needs of colonial powers. Some African states already had institutions for political prisoners. The slave trade itself created holding facilities, barracoons, and forts, brutal precursors to the former prison systems that would follow. Colonial administrations were particularly concerned with acts they perceived as threats to state authority. Rebellion, of course, was at the top of the list. But so were seemingly ordinary offenses like murder, serious battery, even administrative malfeasance. And, ironically, slave trade-related offenses after abolition laws were also targeted. In settler colonies, where white populations sought to build new lives on stolen land, prisons and carceral systems were especially developed. They served as tools to control labor, enforce past laws that restricted movement, and maintain workplace regulations designed to benefit the colonizers. But the very definition of crime was twisted. Colonial rule produced what one study calls the widespread criminalization of native life and labor. Everyday activities, behaviors that were once perfectly normal, could suddenly be branded as criminal offenses. This wasn't about justice, it was about control. In Tanganyika, modern-day Tanzania, punishments were reportedly 3 times as harsh as in the metropole, that is, in Europe, for similar crimes. A petty theft, a minor infraction, could result in brutal consequences far exceeding what a European would face for the same offense. The Congo Free State, under the brutal reign of King Leopold II of Belgium, serves as a horrifying example. Here, colonial abuses reached their peak. Amputations were commonplace. Hostage-taking was routine. Villages were destroyed. And whipping, that ubiquitous tool of colonial oppression, was inflicted with merciless frequency. The Congo became a symbol of colonial depravity, a testament to the inhumanity that could be unleashed in the pursuit of profit and power. Whipping was probably the most ubiquitous form of colonial punishment across the continent. It was a public spectacle, a tool of terror, designed to break the spirit and enforce obedience. But it was more than just punishment. It was a symbol of colonial power, a constant reminder of who was in control. Colonial prisons were often directly tied to forced labor recruitment. Incarceration wasn't just about punishing crime, it was about providing a captive workforce. Prisoners were forced to work in mines, on plantations, building roads, all for the benefit of the colonial regime. And this labor was often coerced through violence and intimidation. But it's crucial to remember that Africa wasn't a blank slate before the arrival of the colonizers. African societies had their own organized criminal justice systems. A West Africa criminal justice study points to the Songhai Empire, with its 2-tier system involving Kodi courts and royal justice for treason, as an example. These systems were often ignored, dismissed, or deliberately dismantled by colonial powers, replaced by their own, often far more brutal, forms of justice. Resistance, of course, was met with swift and brutal repression. But colonial regimes often recorded this resistance as criminality. Those who refused to pay taxes, who resisted forced labor, who dared to challenge colonial authority, were branded as criminals, subjected to harsh punishments, and often imprisoned or even executed. Colonial criminal law was a powerful tool of state formation. It allowed colonial regimes to secure territory, punish resistance, and make African populations governable, at least in their eyes. It profoundly reshaped labor relations. Forced labor, pass laws, and vagrancy rules made criminal law central to colonial economic extraction. It normalized racialized punishment. Colonial governments routinely applied harsher penalties in Africa than in Europe, revealing the deep-seated racism that underpinned the entire colonial project. And the legacy of this system endures. Modern policing, prisons, and penal codes in many African countries are built on colonial foundations, even where post-independence reforms have changed the laws. The echoes of colonial justice can still be heard in the overcrowded prisons, the punitive policing practices, and the ongoing struggles for justice and equality across the continent. Colonialism also distorted historical memory. Colonizers frequently portrayed themselves as bringing law and order to a supposedly lawless continent, conveniently erasing the existence of pre-colonial legal systems and the inherent injustice of their own rule. Today, we see the persistence of pass law and permit logics in some states, through ID checks, movement controls, and bureaucratic restrictions. Land, labor, and resource conflicts still reflect colonial legal histories. Many extraction regimes were stabilized through criminal law and force, and these dynamics continue to play out in the present. Debates over restitution and reparations are now central across Africa. The African Union is pushing to recognize colonialism, slavery, and deportation as historical crimes, reflecting the ongoing political legacy of colonial violence. Memory politics remain active. Public demands for apologies, archives, and recognition of colonial massacres continue to shape diplomacy and domestic politics. The scale of colonial violence is still contested. Estimates of deaths in episodes like the 1947 Malagasy uprising vary widely, from 40,000 to 100,000, highlighting the difficulty in obtaining accurate historical data and the ongoing political sensitivities surrounding these events. French colonial violence in Africa remains especially contentious, with ongoing debate over massacres, village destruction, and counterinsurgency campaigns in places such as Algeria, Cameroon, and Madagascar. The civilizing mission narrative, the justification used by colonial powers to legitimize their rule, continues to suppress the reality of coercion and brutality. Colonial administrations often framed punitive systems as law enforcement, obscuring the fact that they routinely criminalized African mobility, labor refusal, and protest. African legal systems were long minimized. Scholarship on pre-colonial West Africa shows that complex criminal justice existed before European rule, contradicting older colonial-era claims that Africans lacked formal law. The archives themselves are uneven and politically sensitive. Many colonial killings, forced labor systems, and prison records were poorly preserved, selectively reported, or framed to protect imperial reputations, making it difficult to fully account for the extent of colonial crimes. The unpunished crimes of colonial Africa continue to cast a long shadow, shaping the present and demanding a reckoning with the past. It's a history we must confront, not to dwell on the pain, but to learn from it, to ensure that such atrocities never happen again. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of colonial darkness. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to help us shed light on these crucial untold stories.